Hello, I'm Dylan1138, and welcome to the first video in my Star Wars review series. Today we're going to be talking about the book Outbound Flight. Outbound Flight is written by the author Timothy Zahn, who has worked on many Star Wars novels in the past, and a few afterwards. And really people call him the godfather of the expanded universe, because without him we wouldn't have Thrawn, and that's when the Lucas Books group was created, really, during the Thrawn trilogy, where they actually kept an eye on the continuity of everything and making sure everything stuck together, and they had this huge world that they created from it. And that started in the late 80s, like 89 or so, and went on till Disney took over. He had a huge impact, and without him we wouldn't have the name for the planet Coruscant. More on Timothy Zahn and his other stuff later. Today we're here to talk about the book Outbound Flight. Outbound Flight is the final book in his Thrawn trilogy, but it's the first story-wise. Timothy Zahn wanted to create something similar to the way the original movies had the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy. He had the Thrawn trilogy and Survivor's Quest, and then following was his prequel, Outbound Flight. Now, Outbound Flight was mentioned in previous books of his, like all the way back to the Heir to the Empire, and I even heard that Survivor's Quest has a mention of it. Now, this book was pretty cool in the sense that it brought in characters that I love. Also, it had this moment later on that was just insane, and it was a huge realization, and it blew my mind about Palpatine, who is one of the greatest Star Wars characters ever. Even if I don't really prefer Darkseid usually, I love Palpatine and his story arc, and this news you get in this book is insane. It blew my mind. The point of view characters are Cardass, who actually appears in a few other stories later on in the Star Wars continuity. In this one, he's kind of like a young smuggler pilot, just really getting the hang of things and getting put in terrible situations and meeting Thrawn. Then there's Lorana Jinsler, who she was the apprentice to the true Joruus C'baoth. Is that how you say his name? C'baoth. C'baoth. I said he say it C'baoth, but I always say it in my head as C'baoth. C'baoth. That's not right. Another character in this is Obi-Wan Kenobi, and he's one of the point of view characters. His story is awesome in it, until they drop him, and he just flies away. He just disappears. That's it. There's no explanation. He's gone. Kim Midoriya, who is a advisor to Palpatine, but he's also secretly Darth Sidious's, spy. Now this is weird because, I don't know, I always look at this stuff and I wonder, wouldn't you be able to tell by looking at his face long enough that, Palpatine has a similar jaw structure to Sidious. He must be the guy that owns the cafe in episode 2. Yeah, that's Darth Sidious. That's him. Midoriya is actually a really cool character. It took an interesting turn with him that I didn't expect, but it was pretty cool. And I kind of wish we'd see him more in other stories, but I don't think we do. And the last point of view character is some guy who works on the Outbound Flight project named Chaz Uliar, who his parts are small, and I feel like he doesn't get developed enough. He's always just pissed off at Jedi and stuff, which, yeah, it's understandable. A whiny character who has 3 scenes. I don't know, I feel like they could have done better with him. But I also hear he appears in one of the later novels, so maybe he has a bigger part there, and they're just setting him up here. This story takes place after the novel Rogue Planet, which itself takes place right after the movie Phantom Menace. Now, this is 3 years after Phantom Menace. Anakin is Obi-Wan's apprentice, and they're doing their own thing. In the book Rogue Planet, which I didn't read, but I might go back to it eventually. I don't know. Is it good? Tell me. In Rogue Planet, I read online that they had to hunt down a character named Vergir. They are hunting down this character who escapes into deep space. They want to continue the hunt, but they're told they can't. At least that's what I got from what I heard. The story starts off with Cardass and his captain, Dubrak Quinto. And Maris Ferasi. And they're a smuggling group. They are trying to get stuff to the Hutts from stealing from the other Hutts. Hut Wars, I don't know. To escape the Hutts that are chasing them, they jump into lightspeed and go to the very edge of the known galaxy. And this sets them in contact with the Chiss Empire. That's how Thrawn is first introduced to the galaxy. And Thrawn doesn't speak English. He's kind of new to the whole thing. No Chiss has seen humans. It's kind of weird when you think about it in relation to the Old Republic game. There's a crying baby. Baby's still crying. But yeah, they find Thrawn, and Thrawn holds him captive, but Thrawn wants to learn human speak. I don't want to say English and Star Wars. Galactic Basic. Thrawn wants to learn Galactic Basic from them, and so in return, he teaches them some of the Chiss language. Now, you see a bunch of the Chiss structure of their government, and it's very weird, and they're strange people, but it makes it really interesting. I love the Chiss. They're very interesting. They're very weird, and very strategic-minded. Then we jump to Lorana Jinsler and her master, Joris, I'm not going to say his last name, having a meeting with Palpatine about the Outbound Flight project, because there's a car. I need to get a better recording space. Not by a window. Lorana Jinsler and her master, Joris, I'm not going to say his last name, meet up with Palpatine to discuss the Outbound Flight project, because this is Joris's passion project. Like, he wants to lead a group of, like, thousands of civilians, and I think there was, like, 13 or 15 Jedis, and they were going to go out of the galaxy to find the nearest galaxy and find if it's a habitable place for them to settle in. And the Outbound Flight is a group of dreadnoughts that are all attached together, like 6 dreadnoughts, and they each detach, and one would settle on a different planet and whatnot. In the meeting, you meet Doriana, and then the story jumps to Doriana meeting with Palpatine for the first time, and then you find out that he's a double agent working for both, and it's really cool. Then we learn that Mace Windu is not really a fan of Joris. He sends Obi-Wan and Anakin to follow Joris, till Doriana is behind a plot to make sure that Joris gets the Outbound Flight project started, but at the same time he's making it look like he's trying to stop him, even though he's not letting him know that he's there. And Obi-Wan has to watch Joris to make sure that Joris isn't going crazy or doing something against the Jedi Order, and he has to make sure that he's not followed, but instead he kind of just walks up to him and is like, "Hey buddy, I'm here to follow you on this mission." It's all very confusing. The story gets better as it goes. It starts off a little weak when they're on the planet, but once they actually get to Outbound Flight, that's where things get really interesting. People on Outbound Flight are kind of not the biggest fans of Jedi. And you never see that in a Star Wars story. Everyone is like, "Jedis are the heroes of the galaxy. They will save us all. They praise them with gold." In this story, people aren't fans of Jedi. They're kind of like, "Oh, they're just a bunch of guys who are pushing their beliefs onto us. We don't want that stuff. Get out of here." Meanwhile, Thrawn is hunting down some people who are slavers and stuff, and they're just all around bad dudes. Meanwhile, he's kind of misleading everyone in every which way. And he has this plan to help his status, but also he's a good guy and he wants to help his people and other races. I really liked that they made this villain, who is known as one of the best villains in the Star Wars Expanded Universe, into such a likable character who's so nice at the beginning. He knows nothing of Jedi. He always asks about them, and of course he's taught by these smugglers about them who are like, Jedi, they're a bunch of pricks. Yeah. And so he doesn't really have a good view on Jedi, but at the same time, they're Jedi. I mean, they're not the greatest. How snap did I say that? Until Luke's Academy. Doriana is leading his Trade Federation group to intercept Outbound Flight and stop it. Because, this is where it got weird for me, because Palpatine wanted Outbound Flight to launch, but then he didn't want it to launch because he sent the Trade Federation to intercept it and destroy it, because he wanted to kill the 13 or so Jedi that were on board, and all these people, but he didn't want them to launch when they could have just let... That stuff is all revealed later, and it makes a lot more sense. Joris is leading the group in Outbound Flight. Lorana Jinsler, his old Padawan, is now a knight, and she is still kind of getting used to her role. And she's very uncomfortable with it. She's a very kind person who doesn't like to interrupt things, and her master is a very hard, stern person who is kind of a dick. Versus Jedi who thinks that Jedi are the true rulers of the galaxy, basically. Like, he thinks that they should be in charge of everything, and that the Republic is run by them. He has kind of twisted beliefs, and he's really what's wrong with the Jedi Order. Lorana Jinsler is complete opposite. She wants to be respected in her master's eye, but at the same time she doesn't feel that his way of doing stuff among the Jedi is the correct way. She ends up trying to fight against him, and that kind of puts her in a bad spot. Obi-Wan and Anakin, of course, managed to board Outbound Flight, and they're added to the list of Jedi that are on there. And them, along with this Jedi named Master Justine Ma Ning, both feel that what Joruus is doing isn't right, and they're trying to kind of stop him from corrupting things. And the reason Obi-Wan and Anakin are sent is by Master Windu to make sure that what Joruus is doing is not against the Republic, and that he's not trying to gain power in some way. Be kind of a power-hungry crazy man. Meanwhile, Doriana and the Trade Federation are trying to intercept the Outbound Flight at their last stop before they leave the galaxy, which happens to be in Thrawn's territory. Thrawn ends up attacking the Trade Federation, and he annihilates their fleet. And he ends up basically taking control of the Trade Federation fleet. This is where it gets really interesting. This is the part that blew my mind, and I'm sorry, spoilers, if you want to read the book. Thrawn takes out the Trade Federation and comes aboard and meets Doriana. Doriana tells Thrawn that the Jedi Order is corrupt and evil and crazy. Then he tells him about his master's plan. Turns out, Sidious, well, Palpatine, but Doriana doesn't know that, Thrawn doesn't know that. It turns out Palpatine has had information delivered to him by his spies in deep space about an invasion approaching. This blew my mind. He calls them the Far Outsiders, and it turns out that the invasion Palpatine knew about from basically episode 1 was the Yuuzhan Vong invasion. And he didn't want Outbound Flight to get out, because if it did, there's thousands of people on board that could give the Yuuzhan Vong information about the Republic, so that when they invade, they'd be able to wipe it out no problem. It still doesn't make sense why he let Outbound Flight go out in the first place. I guess it was to kill the 13 Jedi that were on board. Thrawn gets the idea in his head that, cool, we're going to stop these people, but let's not do it by force. Let's try and reason with them. Meanwhile, Kardas, who is learning from Thrawn, kind of gets in his head that it's time they should be getting ready to get out of there. He's prepping his own escape with his crew, and they're trying to sneak around, and before getting attacked by Thrawn's new Trade Federation army, that's hard to say fast. Palpatine gives in a call that he needs Obi-Wan and Anakin's help, and he wants them to leave the ship. And so basically he comes to pick them up, and they fly away. And it's kind of like, oh, okay, we're here doing this thing. And then a little bit over halfway through the novel, we're just going to leave the story and, be done with it. Whatever we needed to do to watch him doesn't need to be watched anymore. Joruus, you're good, buddy, whatever. Be crazy. We gotta go, Palpatine needs us. That part kind of bugged me. But then everything after that was crazy. I don't want to dive into too much about what happens at the end, but basically Thrawn becomes a contact for Palpatine. Joruus dies, of course. Outbound Flight crashes on a planet within Chiss territory. Joruus speaks with Thrawn on a communication during the fight, and basically snaps and tries to force choke him. And that's where you learn that, oh, this is how Thrawn hates Jedi later on. Because there's a Jedi that attacks him who's crazy, insane, thinks he's in control of everything. Of course, isn't the best first Jedi to run into. Anyways, I don't want to spoil all the stuff that happens at the end. It's actually a really good story. There's just a few points that are kind of odd. Don't make too much sense, but I mean, also I feel there's other books of Timothy Zahn's that are going to explain that stuff better. But overall, there were moments like, it was a really fun story. It was well written, it had great characters, the dialogue was fantastic. I'm excited to see more of Cardass. Obi-Wan is one of my favorite characters, so it was great to see more of him despite his quick exit. Like I said, Doriana is a great character, and I'm actually sad that we don't see more of him. And then there's Thrawn. Thrawn is awesome in this book, and I know he's just going to become more awesome as the story goes on. Next week, I'll be talking about the first in the Republic Commando series, Hard Contact, and from there on, we're taking off into some really interesting Clone Wars stuff. And Mandalorian stuff. Yes. Anyways, I'll catch you guys next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.